You do not feel liver damage the way you feel a headache. That is what makes it dangerous. It does not kick down the door. It slips in quietly, sits in your routine, hides inside your just one more, and waits while you keep telling yourself you are still fine. That is the trap. Real damage rarely begins with drama. It begins with repetition. It begins with habits that stop feeling like choices. It begins when a person says, "I am not that bad," while the body is already sending warnings in a language too subtle to respect. A lot of people imagine liver disease as something distant, something dramatic, something that only happens after decades of extreme drinking. But the truth is more unsettling and more important than that. Your body keeps score much earlier than most people think. The liver is one of the hardest working organs in the human body. It filters, processes, stores, converts, protects, repairs and fights for you every single day, without applause. And when alcohol enters the system, the liver becomes the one carrying the burden. Every drink is not just a casual moment. Biologically, it is a task. It is a demand. It is your body being forced to neutralize a toxin before that toxin harms your cells. That is the scientific reality so many people overlook. Alcohol is not processed like water, and it is not handled like harmless pleasure. Once it enters the bloodstream, a portion is absorbed quickly, and the rest moves through the digestive system and into circulation. From there, the liver takes over. Enzymes begin breaking alcohol down into intermediate compounds, and some of those compounds are even more damaging than alcohol itself. That is where the danger sharpens. The liver is not only dealing with the original substance, it is also dealing with toxic byproducts created during the breakdown process. So even before a person feels drunk, the body is already doing emergency chemistry. And the body can do that for a while. That is what fools people. Human beings are incredibly adaptable, and the liver is remarkably resilient. But resilience is often misunderstood as invincibility. Just because your body can survive a pattern does not mean that pattern is safe. Just because you can still go to work, still smile, still post, still function, still laugh with friends, does not mean your internal health is untouched. Damage does not need your permission to begin. It only needs enough repetition. One of the clearest dangers comes from binge drinking, because binge drinking is not just having fun. It is a metabolic shock wave. When a large amount of alcohol arrives in a short period of time, the liver cannot calmly process it at an even pace. It becomes overloaded. The normal detox pathways are pressured. Oxidative stress rises. Inflammation increases. Cells become more vulnerable. And the frightening part is that even relatively limited periods of repeated binge episodes can start pushing the liver toward early-stage disease. That means this is not merely about lifelong alcoholism in the traditional sense. This is also about patterns that people normalize in youth, on weekends, at parties, during celebrations, after stress, after heartbreak, after work, after exams, after life. That is where the emotional truth enters the science. Many people do not drink because they are careless. They drink because they are tired, because they are lonely, because they want relief, because they want confidence, because they want silence, because they want the noise in their head to soften for a few hours. And that makes this subject deeply human. Behind every unhealthy pattern, there is often pain, pressure, numbness, or escape. But the body does not interpret emotional reasons. Biology only responds to exposure. The liver does not know whether you drank to celebrate or to survive the day. It only knows it has been given something toxic to break down again and again and again. At first, the consequences can seem almost invisible. This is where many people lose the battle before they even realize one has started. Early liver stress does not always scream. Sometimes it whispers through fatigue that feels easy to dismiss. Sometimes it shows up as brain fog, poor recovery, sluggishness, digestive discomfort, sleep disruption, changes in appetite, strange heaviness, unexplained weakness, or a body that simply does not feel right anymore. Some people notice inflammation in places they never connect back to liver health. Some notice persistent exhaustion. Some notice that their skin changes, their eyes look dull, their breath changes, their belly grows, or their energy collapses in ways motivation alone cannot fix. The body speaks, but many people have been trained to ignore anything that does not feel like an emergency. Then the pattern deepens. Fat can begin accumulating in the liver. This stage matters more than people realize because fatty liver is not harmless just because it is common. Fat in the liver is a warning sign that the organ is under metabolic pressure. And once fat builds up, inflammation can follow. Once inflammation becomes persistent, healing no longer looks clean. The body begins laying down scar tissue. That is when the danger becomes more serious, because scar tissue does not perform the work that healthy liver cells perform. It takes up space, but it does not carry the same life-sustaining function. The more this process continues, the more the organ loses efficiency, flexibility, and regenerative power. This is why time matters. Frequency matters. Quantity matters. Context matters. Alcohol strength matters. Drinking on an empty stomach matters. Combining alcohol with high sugar intake matters. The body does not experience these as isolated lifestyle details. It experiences them as compounding stress. Sugar can intensify liver burden by driving fat production and metabolic dysfunction. Processed diets can worsen inflammation. Lack of sleep can reduce resilience. Medications can add extra pressure. The result is not one single enemy, but a pileup. And this is how people drift toward illness while still convincing themselves that the problem is not serious enough to confront. Here is the truth that must be said plainly. You do not need to wait for collapse to care. You do not need to wait for jaundice, severe pain, advanced swelling, hormonal disruption, dramatic test results, or a terrifying diagnosis before deciding your health matters. Waiting for a catastrophe is one of the most expensive forms of denial. The body rewards early honesty. It punishes long avoidance. And yet, this is not a message of hopelessness. It is the opposite. The most inspiring part of this entire subject is that the liver has an astonishing ability to recover when the damage has not reached the point of irreversible scarring. That means the body is not just vulnerable. It is also willing. It is willing to rebuild, willing to reduce fat accumulation, willing to calm inflammation, willing to restore function, willing to respond when you finally stop feeding the fire. That is not weakness. That is one of the greatest biological acts of mercy in the human body. Think about that for a moment. Even after being overworked, underprotected, and repeatedly exposed to damage, this organ still tries to heal, still tries to adapt, still tries to save you. There is something deeply moving in that. Your body is not your enemy. It has been fighting for you this whole time. The question is whether you are ready to stop making it fight alone. This is why awareness matters more than shame. Shame keeps people stuck. Shame makes people hide. Shame makes them avoid tests, avoid truth, avoid change, avoid conversation. But awareness creates power. Awareness turns vague fear into real action. Awareness says, I do not have to pretend anymore. Awareness says, my habits are not random. They are shaping my future. Awareness says, I still have time to choose differently. That is where healing begins, not in perfection, in honesty. And honesty can be uncomfortable. It can mean admitting that what you called normal was actually harmful. It can mean admitting that the nightly routine became dependence. It can mean admitting that the weekend pattern was not harmless fun. It can mean admitting that your body has been asking for help for longer than you wanted to believe. But there is dignity in that truth. There is strength in that moment. Because the moment you stop lying to yourself is the moment your future can start changing. No one drifts into better health by accident. Better health begins when a person decides that feeling temporarily good is no longer worth becoming permanently damaged. Better health begins when short-term relief stops outranking long-term life. Better health begins when discipline becomes an act of self-respect instead of punishment. And that is what this conversation is really about. Not fear for the sake of fear, not guilt for the sake of guilt, but awakening, a wake-up call, a reminder that your body is not disposable, your health is not endless, and your future is being written by repeated choices. So if your body has been sending signals, do not mock them. If your energy has changed, do not brush it off forever. If your habits have become harder to defend, pay attention. If you know deep down that your routine is stealing from your health, listen to that truth. Because prevention is powerful. But early correction is powerful too. And even now, even after all the excuses, even after all the delay, even after all the nights you told yourself tomorrow would be different, the body still responds to better decisions. That is the hope inside the science. The liver can suffer quietly, yes, but it can also recover dramatically when given the chance. Which means the real question is not whether your body wants to heal. The real question is whether you are finally ready to stop hurting the one thing that has been trying to keep you alive all along. The most dangerous sentence a person can say is, I feel okay, so I must be okay. That belief has delayed more healing than almost anything else. The liver can be under pressure long before life looks visibly broken. Blood work may shift before your appearance does. Cellular stress can rise before your routine changes. Inflammation can build before anyone around you notices. And because the liver is so resilient, people often confuse survival with safety. They think that because they are still standing, still working, still social, still productive enough to get through the week, nothing serious is happening. But the body is not measured only by what it can still tolerate. It is measured by what it is quietly sacrificing to keep you functioning. This is why liver damage is not just a physical story. It is also a story about denial, delay, and the emotional cost of looking away. Many people keep drinking not because they do not care, but because they are trying not to feel. They are carrying stress, anger, emptiness, disappointment, loneliness, or exhaustion, and alcohol becomes a shortcut to temporary relief. For a little while, it can create the illusion of release. It can make tension feel softer. It can make silence easier. It can make people feel less trapped inside themselves. But biology always sends the invoice later. What feels like relief in the evening can become inflammation in the night. Metabolic disruption by morning and cumulative injury over months and years. Scientifically, the progression matters. The liver is not usually destroyed in one dramatic moment. It is usually worn down in stages. First comes repeated exposure, then metabolic stress, then fat accumulation, then inflammation, then impaired repair, then fibrosis, which means scar tissue starts replacing healthy tissue. Then, for some people, that advances toward cirrhosis, where the normal architecture of the liver becomes distorted and blood flow through the organ becomes compromised. That is when the consequences stop being subtle. Toxin handling worsens. Protein production drops. Hormonal balance becomes affected. Fluid regulation becomes impaired. Nutrient processing becomes weaker. At that stage, the body is no longer just adapting. It is struggling. And one of the cruelest realities is that people often discover the seriousness late, because the early symptoms are so easy to rationalize. Fatigue gets blamed on work. Poor sleep gets blamed on stress. Bloating gets blamed on food. Weight changes get blamed on age. Low motivation gets blamed on personality. Reduced performance gets blamed on burnout. A growing belly gets treated like a cosmetic issue instead of a metabolic warning. Itching, weakness, low appetite, poor exercise tolerance, mood changes, brain fog, sexual health changes, and unexplained decline can all become part of the picture, yet still be dismissed one by one because no single symptom sounds dramatic enough on its own. This is how gradual damage hides in plain sight. There is also a powerful link between liver health and the rest of the body that many people underestimate. A struggling liver does not suffer alone. The effects ripple outward. Blood sugar regulation worsens. Inflammation spills into other systems. Hormonal patterns shift. Recovery from workouts changes. Muscle maintenance becomes harder. Sleep quality often drops. Appetite regulation can become more chaotic. Skin may change. Mental sharpness may dull. Digestive function can become inconsistent. In more advanced stages, toxins that would normally be processed efficiently may begin affecting the brain, mood, and concentration. That means liver damage is not only about one organ becoming sick. It is about the entire body losing one of its central protectors. This is also where drinking patterns matter more than people want to admit. Some people comfort themselves by saying they do not drink every day. Others say they only drink socially. Others say they can stop any time. But the body does not judge intentions. It responds to exposure, dose, and recovery time. Drinking heavily in bursts can be profoundly damaging, especially when repeated. Drinking moderate amounts frequently can also become harmful over time, especially if sleep, nutrition, and metabolic health are already poor. High-proof alcohol increases burden. Carbonation can speed absorption. Drinking without food can intensify exposure. Combining alcohol with sugary mixers compounds the metabolic hit. Pairing alcohol with chronic overeating, processed foods, or pre-existing insulin resistance makes the situation even more dangerous. The damage rarely travels alone. It usually arrives as part of a lifestyle pattern. That is why the conversation cannot stop at alcohol alone. A liver already under pressure from sugar overload, highly processed food, poor sleep, medication stress, or obesity is not entering drinking episodes from a neutral baseline. It is entering already burdened. And that is part of the modern problem. Many people are not choosing between a healthy liver and alcohol. They are adding alcohol on top of a system that is already inflamed. They are stacking damage on damage. This is how younger people can move towards serious liver disease far earlier than older generations expected. Not because the body has changed, but because the combined pressures have intensified. Still, none of this means the situation is hopeless. In fact, this is where hope becomes most meaningful, because real hope is not denial. Real hope tells the truth and still points toward recovery. The liver is one of the few organs with extraordinary regenerative potential. That fact should awaken something powerful in anyone who feels they have gone too far. The body may be hurt, but it may still be highly responsive. Liver fat can decrease when the driving causes are removed. Inflammation can calm. Enzyme levels can improve. Function can rebound. Energy can return. Clarity can return. Strength can return. But recovery demands a level of honesty that many people postpone for too long. It means accepting that the body cannot heal fully while being injured continuously. You cannot expect regeneration while repeating the same exposure that caused the harm. The liver is forgiving, but it is not magical. It responds to changed conditions. That means fewer toxins, better nutrition, more stable blood sugar, improved hydration, better sleep, and enough time without repeated insults for repair processes to work. The body is capable of remarkable recovery, but not while being forced to spend every day surviving preventable damage. This is where motivation has to become more than a mood. Waiting until you feel motivated is unreliable because destructive habits are often strongest when motivation is weakest. The real shift comes when health becomes a decision rooted in identity. A person stops asking, "Can I get away with this?" and starts asking, "What kind of life am I building?" That question changes everything. Because liver health is not merely about avoiding illness. It is about protecting your energy, your future, your resilience, your relationships, your mental clarity, your hormones, your strength, your longevity, and your ability to fully show up in your own life. Alcohol damage steals more than lab values. It steals capacity. And that theft is often gradual enough to normalize. A person forgets what clear energy felt like. They forget what waking up refreshed felt like. They forget what stable mood felt like. They forget what sharp thinking felt like. They forget what genuine vitality felt like. This is one reason change can feel emotionally intense. Reducing or stopping alcohol is not just removing a substance. It is confronting the reasons it became necessary in the first place. It is facing stress without sedation. It is facing loneliness without numbing. It is facing identity without ritual escape. That takes courage. But courage is not the absence of craving or discomfort. Courage is choosing what heals you, even when what harms you still calls your name. And every day you choose healing, your body notices. Not metaphorically, biologically. Your cells notice. Your inflammatory burden notices. Your sleep notices. Your blood sugar notices. Your hormones notice. Your digestive system notices. Your brain notices. The liver especially notices. When the stream of toxic load slows down, it gets room to work again, room to repair, room to restore what can still be restored. That is one of the most powerful truths in all of health. The body responds to direction. It may not transform instantly, but it responds consistently. This is why early action matters so much. The point of no return in liver disease is not where most people are when they first become concerned, but some people drift dangerously close because fear convinces them not to look. They avoid testing because they fear bad news. They avoid change because they fear discomfort. They avoid truth because they fear guilt. Yet avoiding information never protects health. It only protects the illusion of safety. Real safety begins when you are willing to know, when you are willing to measure, when you are willing to admit the body deserves evidence, not excuses. And even if damage has already started, that is not the same as defeat. There is a huge difference between injury and finality. Fatty liver is not the same as irreversible failure. Elevated enzymes are not the same as hopelessness. Even significant metabolic stress is not the same as a finished story. What matters is what happens next. What matters is whether the warning becomes wisdom or gets ignored until it becomes catastrophe. So if this subject reaches something personal in you, do not turn away from that feeling. That discomfort may be your honesty waking up. That tension may be the part of you that already knows the truth. Maybe your body has been tired for longer than you admit. Maybe your habits have become more frequent than you planned. Maybe your confidence about being in control is weaker than it sounds. Maybe your health has been paying for your coping mechanisms. If any of that is true, let this be the moment you stop bargaining with biology. Your liver is not asking for perfection. It is asking for a chance to stop fighting the same battle every day, a chance to recover from the load you keep placing on it, a chance to return to the work it was designed to do instead of spending all its strength trying to survive what you keep pouring into it. That chance is not created by wishing. It is created by action, by interruption of the pattern, by respect for the body, by choosing truth over habit. There is something deeply powerful about realizing that healing is not a fantasy. It is a direction. Every drink avoided can matter. Every cycle interrupted can matter. Every day of reduced inflammation can matter. Every honest choice can matter. The body is listening all the time. The liver is adapting all the time. The future is being shaped all the time. So do not underestimate what can change when you finally decide that your life is worth more than the routine that has been draining it. Because in the end, the question is not whether alcohol can damage the liver. Science has already answered that. The deeper question is whether you will wait for suffering to force change, or whether you will choose change while healing is still within reach. And that choice, difficult as it may feel, can become the moment your body stops surviving you and starts recovering for you.